Right. I think we've given it a couple of minutes for folks to join, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Thanks for joining us today, y'all. My name is Lindsay Hoyt. I am Director of Admission, and I've got one of our English professors here, Michael, who's going to talk to us about the department and answer any questions that you have about the experience of the English major, just read in general, whatever it is that you want to talk about. That's what we're here for today. So some logistics for the hour or so. If you can go ahead and put your questions in the chat, please. That's what we'll use to kind of fuel the discussion. And Michael and I will talk about the questions as they come in through the chat. So feel free to ask those questions there and we'll get us started. All right, so I'm going to throw it over to Michael to introduce himself and the department, and then we'll get started.
Hi there. Welcome to everybody today. I'm Michael Faletra. I am currently the chair of the English department at Reed College. Our department is a department of about 12 faculty. 10 of those faculty teach literature primarily, and 2 of those faculty are creative writing faculty, a poet and a prose writer. We have programs kind of in both those areas. I've been at Reed for over 20 years now, I think since 2001. I'm from the Boston area originally. I'm so happy to teach at Reed College. There's so many reasons why I love being here, but I think the main reason is just that I love working with you guys, learning from you, learning with you, kind of seeing you along through your own educational journey. So it's always a pleasure. My particular field of interest is medieval and early modern literature, but we also have people in my department that specialize in all kinds of other fields. We have people who do specialize in, say, Harlem Renaissance poetry and drama. We have people who do Shakespeare. We have people who do early modern poetry, John Donne, Paradise Lost, stuff like that. We have people who do Victorian Gothic novels and people who do British modernist fiction. We have courses in poetry and novels and fiction and drama. We have some courses too in things like media studies and game theory and film. And so in some ways it's a very big department with a lot of offerings. We're actually one of the biggest departments here at Reed in terms of number of faculty. And also, I think looking ahead to this year, in numbers of students, I think next year we'll actually have about 40 seniors who will be graduating next year, be doing a senior thesis, and we're really excited that there's just been so much interest in our department and in the study of literature in the last few years. I wanted to just give you a quick overview of what kinds of what if you became an English major, what your general 4 years might look like. We require of English majors 2 courses at what we call the 200 level. Those are sort of intro level English courses where, depending on the course, you'll be kind of being exposed to, say, the elements of how to read a poem, how to kind of take a poem apart and put it back together. How to interpret things, or it could be a course that might be more on how do you evaluate characterization in a novel? What kind of tricks do novels do? Kind of giving you some of those basic building blocks of vocabulary to help you as you move into higher courses. So you have to take 2 of those lower level courses, and those are generally courses that are open to lots of students at Reed, not just English majors, but it's actually great that there's I learned a ton from science majors in those courses, the kinds of questions they bring and the kind of perspectives they have. And then sort of the bread and butter of our major are our 300 level courses where you have to take 6 of those. 2 of those can be actually courses in creative writing that you can count toward the major. And you're also welcome to take more creative writing courses on top of that if you want. And those upper level courses tend to be on often more specialized topics that maybe speak more to the particular interests, the research interests, the teaching interests, just the intellectual interests of the faculty who are teaching those courses. And those vary year to year. And even I sort of go in a 3-year cycle of things I like to teach. So, in 3 years, I may offer 6 different courses over the course of those 3 years. So to kind of mix it up a little bit. And I think that's true more or less for most of the faculty in my department. And then, so you're taking those 200 level courses, more or less your freshman, sophomore years, and the 300 level courses, more or less your sophomore, junior into your senior years. Your senior year is also taken up by writing a 2-semester senior thesis, which is in the English department anyway, is a document. It usually is about 3 chapters long, maybe about 60 to 70 pages long. I know that sounds crazy right now, but people do it and they do it successfully every year. It's really exciting. And that, yeah, tends to be on a topic that you've developed over the course of your time at Reed and that you've talked about with a faculty advisor and who sees you through the process. And it's the capstone of your Reed education and of your study of English literature. So that's a kind of overview of our department. Like I said, there's lots of things that different people specialize in my department. Students in our department are also encouraged to take courses in humanities, in the other literatures of other national traditions. So if you were interested in taking a couple courses in Spanish literature, either in translation or in Spanish, that's good. Or if you were interested in taking a course on the Russian novel or on French modernist film or something like that, there are ways in which those can count toward the English major as well. So I think that's all I have in terms of kind of general intro. I know that was a lot to throw at you, but maybe you have some specific questions, then I can go through some of the stuff, maybe and find a resolution as we go through the hour.
Great. Thank you for that intro. I think that's a really great place to start. So I'm just going to kind of start reading through some questions here that are put in the chat. So Viviana says that they're learning about medieval literature and absolutely loving it right now. So do we have any classes that talk about the subject?
Yes, I teach actually courses in medieval literature. So this year I'm teaching a course it's actually called Middle English Literature. We're reading a whole bunch we're actually learning the Middle English language, which takes about 3 weeks if you're interested. And reading a bunch of kind of central or seminal texts in Middle English. Some stuff by Chaucer, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Julian Norwich is what we're actually reading this week. She was a 14th, 15th century mystic. She actually is the first woman writing prose in English at all. And we'll be ending the semester with reading Mallory's Morte d'Arthur in Middle English. Actually, it's a big fat book, happens to be right here. I always try to stay about a week ahead of my students. So that's what I'm teaching this semester. We have other courses I teach regularly. I teach a course on Dante's Divine Comedy. I teach a course on, last semester was Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. I've taught courses in medieval romances and Arthurian literature, medieval Celtic literatures. Probably forgetting something, but yeah.
Well, that's, yeah, great answer. Obviously, there's a lot of choices there to take within that specific interest.
Yeah.
So I've got a good kind of general question here from Madeline. What do you think is special or unique about the English department at Reed?
I think I do like the sequencing. I think the structure of the major is good. I think starting these lower level courses, which tend to focus on genre and give you kind of, like I said before, vocabulary for thinking about, oh, what do I do with a novel? How do I approach style in a piece of prose? How do I read a poem? That starting with those kinds of courses and then moving forward into more specialized topics, I think that's a really pedagogically useful, like incredibly valuable thing to do. And I know that not all English programs sequence things in that particular way. And I also think like having the thesis as a capstone at the end of your time here gives you something, it gives you a way, it's not just like a big project you have to do in your senior year, but it's also a way of thinking about like, wow, what has my intellectual trajectory been? And how have I moved through my thought process in the last 3 or 4 years? Or how have I developed intellectually or as a thinker in the last 3 or 4 years? And what do I have to like? And now I have something big to show for it. And I know students always feel incredibly satisfied after they've written their senior thesis as well. So I think those are really unique parts of our program. Uh, Obviously, every class has its own unique things that it does too, and it really depends on your interests. Uh, how what kind of path you take through those. But yeah.
Yeah. So that leads me to a great next question, I think, is, the thesis. Obviously, Reed is not the only school that does a senior thesis, but it is something that is kind of special and a big part of the experience for all of our students. So can you talk to us a little bit about what a thesis might look like for English? And we've got questions about creative writing. So what a creative writing thesis might look like, and kind of how you help guide students through that process and advise them through that process.
Yeah, I would say that, really the best way to think of a thesis is the capstone of your own education and intellectual interests, right? And while you'll be assigned a faculty advisor, it's not that you have to write in the area of expertise of that particular advisor, right? It's nice when those two things dovetail a bit. Um, but it doesn't always happen. And one of the reasons that doesn't happen is that we want to be open to having this really be your experience and having you figure out what it is, what ideas or what texts you want to delve into, what ideas you want to explore. And we're going to help you go through that process and, from start to finish. So for example, although I teach medieval and early modern literature, the past few years, just the past few years, let's see, I'm doing a thesis right now I'm doing a Shakespeare thesis right now. But I'm also doing a thesis I did a thesis last year on the Wizard of Oz books, right? I've done theses on Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian and on vampire novels and on all kinds of things. So sometimes I always think it's great for me because often there's times I get to learn more about a different field that I didn't know as well before. So that's been, so that gives you a kind of sense that you don't have to, it's really about what the thing is that you want to explore and develop your own expertise in. And we have the tools to kind of help you along the way in doing that. Did I answer that whole question? I feel like I missed a bit of the way you pitched that, Lindsay.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. So I did want to talk a little bit about kind of creative writing within this, and what a creative writing thesis might look like. And I will add that, I know one of our admission counselors, Caitlin Barrell, who graduated last year, wrote her thesis as a book of short stories. So it was a, creative writing thesis that was prose. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely an option. To do that, you have to make sure you've taken a good number of the creative writing courses, right? They're not going to let you do a creative writing thesis if you haven't done any creative writing courses. But yeah, that's definitely an option. A lot of students, they'll write a novella or a series of short stories for their senior thesis, or a collection of poems on a particular thing. When you do these creative theses, it's usually it's a project that you're developing that year. It's not a project that like, oh, I've been writing a novel since I was 14 and now I'm finishing it. But it's usually okay, these are the kind of things I like to explore in fiction, right? And in the writing of fiction right now, or these are the things I feel moved to write poetry about now, and thinking about how you're going to shape that over the course of several months. So, and there's a lot of feedback and back and forth with your advisor through that process, feedback on poems or stories, having advisors tell you like, hey, I see you're interested in this. Maybe you should read this collection of stories by Arundhati Roy, or this book of poetry by Geoffrey Hill, or whatever. They may see like, oh, there are ways they can kind of plant some seeds that might grow into beautiful fruit down the road. And there's also a part of these creative writing theses that I think they ask you to reflect upon the process after you've done it. Like, okay, I've written in some ways a small book of poetry, let's say. Maybe I've got 40 pages of poems that I've done. Uh, Let me reflect about that for 10 pages, about like what they mean or what I think they're doing. And so that's actually part of that process of writing a creative thesis as well.
Right, so it's
We have
not
a
just
great,
purely creative, it's also
it's
pulling
reflective
the
and
academic piece of it together too.
yeah, like you might say in that critical part, or that reflective part, like what kinds of intellectual issues you feel like you're engaging, or how the poems you're writing or the stories you're writing are speaking back to other writers, or engaging in some kind of dialogue about a particular theme that you see other people working on too. So there's lots of different ways that could go. I hate it's not really a recipe in a way, because creativity is not like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've got a question here. Can you speak to the difference between a cultural emphasis and literature emphasis in, it sounds like specifically in creative writing,
Oh, and creative writing.
or
That,
perhaps generally? I think if you want to answer it more generally, that's totally fine.
yeah, that's actually some wording from an older version of the catalog, I think.
Gotcha.
So, in a sense that in general, I could talk to you about in the English major, like, so it's not maybe so specific to creative writing, but in the English major, there's sort of two ways you can go through the major. So one is you do the English sequence the way I was presenting before, 200 level courses, 300 level courses, thesis. Um, and it's really about what the nature of some of the out of department requirements are. So there's one of those tracks where we're asking you to take two courses in in one of the college's upper level humanities sequences. So the Reed College has an upper level humanities sequence um, in Chinese civilization and culture, or they have one in early modern civilization and culture, or they have one in I think it's in modern culture. I think from French Revolution to the present, or something like that. So we ask you to take two courses among those different offerings. That's the cultural or historical emphasis. And then the other emphasis is if you're someone who is really interested in pursuing a foreign language, or if you already have advanced skills in a foreign language, you can actually, instead of doing those two courses in a upper level humanities course, you can just take two courses of an upper level language course. That's, so you'd be reading, say, Don Quixote in Spanish. So you're reading literature in its original language. So that's the other track. So there's those two different tracks. And I'd say about maybe 2/3 of our students wind up doing the humanities track, and about 1/3 do the language track.
Mm.
And it depends. Like a lot of English majors actually decide to do a minor in one of the foreign languages, because you can get a minor in French or Spanish or Russian, Chinese, and the other language. I'm sure I just forgot a couple. But yeah.
So that leads me into my next question really well too. I think we've got a question about double majoring. So can you talk about how students combine interests and really pursue, different interests academically through their time at Reed?
Yeah, yeah. Double majoring it's absolutely possible at Reed College. It's not something I see students do very much. The reason is to double major, you actually have to write two senior theses. So to double major, you have to fulfill all the requirements for two different majors, and those are going to include a senior thesis in both cases. So very few people double major. I think there was one about 10 years ago, maybe, in our department. I think she wrote two theses. I think it was bio and English, but it's really pretty rare. What I see students doing more are things like I know. So I've had students say major in English and then take a lot of computer science classes, or major in biology. And actually, the past couple of years, tons and tons of students have been minoring in English as well. So I see a lot of students majoring in biology and minoring in English, or majoring in sociology and minoring in English, or majoring in chemistry, one right now, and minoring in English. So those are really popular combinations, it seems to me. Or if, the minor in English is 5 classes. So I've also seen some students, there's a biology student I have this year who's in that boat, and also a linguistics student I had a few years back who, yeah, they're majoring in linguistics or biology. They just took as many other English courses as they could. They just packed them in. So it was almost the equivalent of a second major. It's 5 courses for a minor. I think it's 9 courses besides thesis for the major. And I think they did maybe they did 7 or 8. So they were somewhere in between. But it was personally fulfilling for them. So there's lots of ways you can kind of construe that. But yeah, you can double major. It's just if you're going to do it, you really have to plan from the ground floor how you're going to squeeze all the requirements for both majors in 4 years. But it can happen.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of the structure of English classes. What does the class itself look like? How big are they? What are the kind of homework expectations? What is the structure of an English class?
Yeah. Let me think. So, well, I could answer this so easily about my own classes, but I'm also trying to generalize a little bit about some other people. In terms of size, our tuner level courses tend to be about 20 students apiece. They are capped at 24, but they don't always fill all the way. So they tend to be a little, 20 feels like, when you have 20, it feels more like a seminar size, 20 or smaller. And the 300 levels tend to be a little smaller than that, maybe 12 to 15 students, sometimes less. I mean, I've occasionally had 8 for a class. I happen to have big classes this semester, bigger classes, but sometimes it's just the luck of the draw, the time that you're teaching or whatever.
But big by Reed standards, right? So
Those
you're
are,
talking,
yeah,
15.
those are big by read standards. At other, I mean, in my undergraduate education, which was at Boston University, I was in English classes that I think they capped them at 36 students. It was not amenable to discussion. And that's what I guess what I would emphasize is that all of my classes, and as far as I can think of, the courses of all my colleagues are based on their conference classes, which means they're based on student discussion. Like the 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 meat of the course is happening through students talking. And really, ideally, I want to hear students' voices more than I want to hear my voice in a classroom. I'll kind of get things going maybe a little bit at the beginning. Maybe I'll put something on the board, or a little background information, or I'll pitch an opening question or two, and then hope that the students, and it's usually the case, the students kind of bring their own interests or and their reactions to the text. And then we shape the conversation as we go through the hour and a half. So on a day-to-day basis, that's what most of my courses look like. The amount of reading for a particular class it really depends what we're reading. It could vary from, wow, like a really difficult 30-page essay that we're working through, to or a Middle English poem, let's say, that was, it's 20 pages of print, but it's in Middle English. So, we have to kind of go more slowly through it. If sometimes when I've taught novels, I've assigned, like, say, 80 to 100 pages of reading, but it might be quicker reading, right? So that will vary class to class and sometimes week to week. But you always kind of know the schedule of readings ahead of time from the course syllabus, so you can plan. In terms of other aspects of workload, though there will be probably 2 or 3 papers per semester. If you're taking one of my classes, I know other professors who do more frequent papers but shorter ones. I don't think most of my colleagues do the kind of only one term paper at the end kind of thing. We tend to do more shorter work, but sometimes there's other combinations. Some faculty rely a lot on presentations in class, so students doing presentations, or different other types of group work. I was teaching a course last year on medieval women writers, and we actually looked at it was actually an encyclopedia that was made in this nunnery in the 12th century for nuns to kind of learn about the world through. It was done by nuns, it was made by nuns, written by nuns, illustrated by nuns. And I gave each of the students a kind of section of that to present to the rest of the class. And it took a few class days, but it was really good because it set us up with really great insights that we could build on the rest of the semester. So sometimes we're doing kind of group work, group presentation work like that. Other faculty, yeah, they might assign everybody a critical reading they have to kind of write a review of at some point and post it on a website. Some faculty still have, well, they call it Moodle here. I don't know what they call it other places. Canvas, I guess. Some of these online kind of teaching tools that you're posting comments to something before class. I don't tend to do that, but I know some faculty do that. So yeah, it really depends. For me, it changes semester to semester. I like to try different things in the classroom, and sometimes different types of classes I'm teaching require different types of assignments, right? So the medieval women writers, I knew like, oh, I need to kind of front load this with having people really get nitty gritty with the material. Whereas when I teach Dante's Divine Comedy, it's a little more like, okay, here we're reading these 3 cantos for today, and that's it. So yeah, it changes. Yeah.
So you mentioned in your intro that you were talking about, that the English department is one of the larger departments at Reed. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about kind of what are the benefits to students who are in one of the larger departments of a small liberal arts college? Like, how does that play out and how does that benefit them?
Yeah, well, we actually have more resources. I mean, in most ways, we're better resourced than most of the smaller departments. A couple of the small, like art history, actually weirdly has a lot of money, but so we actually are able to do things like take everybody out bowling. Well, we haven't done that for the past couple of years because of COVID, but we used to do that pretty regularly. Or host parties for juniors while they're thinking about what their senior thesis is going to be. So we try to build community in different ways, and so I think it's nice because if you figure there's going to be about maybe 30 people in your cohort, that's just enough people to that's a good big enough group of people to find friends, assuming you're probably not going to like everybody, right? If there were only 6 majors and you didn't like 3 of them, then okay, you're in trouble. But when we have about 30, there's a better chance that you're going to kind of find like your people within that number. So there's that. Also, we have funds that students can access usually over the summer. It's called the Eddings funds, and they can use these to do projects that kind of independent projects that they propose that have to do with the English major in some way. So, for example, students have used the money to go do research at, say, an archive or library in some other state, the Beinecke at Yale or someplace like that, or the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C. Or they've decided like, oh, I want to go do this. I had a student a couple of years ago who decided like, I really want to learn Welsh. And so he found this summer program where it was like a 6-week thing, intensive Welsh in Wales. And we were able to give him some money to be able to do that. Or there's students who've applied and used the money to take a course paper they wrote. And maybe this was a student who was thinking of graduate school and kind of work it up over the summer. Use the summer to work it up into something they could actually get published somewhere. Or I've had students I know of who have asked for money to, okay, this is maybe sounds silly, but to take trains around the United States and write poetry about their experience, right? So, kind of thinking outside the box, or to write short stories on a particular topic that they need to go to this place for. So they use them for you can use them for kind of travel, but travel that's related to some kind of intellectual or creative project. There was a student who actually wrote a graphic novel once over the summer, which really, it's more like a children's book. It's actually really cool. But then in the fall, we actually have a reception where students get to present whatever they did over the past summer. Mostly English majors attend the reception. It's fun. Yeah.
That's very cool. So tell me a little bit more about study abroad. Is that something that English majors do? Are they encouraged to do that? How does that work?
Yeah, we totally encourage English majors to study abroad. The only parameter you need to kind of work around a little bit is during your junior year, you do have to take a junior seminar, which is a 300 level course, which is giving you the skills you need, like kind of research skills you need to do your senior thesis. So it doesn't make sense to go away for both semesters of junior year, but um, I've had students who have gone away their whole sophomore year, or students who have gone away their second semester sophomore year, or second semester sophomore year, and one of the semesters in their junior year. And so there's ways to work around it. However, it falls out. But a lot of students, we have a lot of students in recent years go to Trinity College Dublin for different programs, University of Edinburgh. There's some program in Paris that a bunch of English majors have been to. There's a program in Rome that some English majors have gone to. There's a program, probably the most popular one recently there's a program in Oxford that a lot of English majors have been going through. So once you get here, you can go to the study abroad office and they have brochures and information about a lot of these things. But there's basically, if there's some place you want to go, they could probably find a program there. But some, I know, some I can kind of bear witness to as being a little more together.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the junior seminar and what that is?
Oh yeah, junior seminar. You have to take one semester of junior seminar sometime during your junior year. It's offered both semesters, so you can kind of decide when that's most convenient. And what you're doing in junior seminar is, I mean, usually, well, not usually, always, there's some kind of course content, right? So for example, last year, I actually taught junior seminar last year, and we were reading a bunch of books and thinking about what the art of reading was. Like we were reflecting on what it means to read a book and how the reader's response plays into it and how books summon response from readers. So we read Dr. Faustus and Jane Eyre and Paradise Lost and Beloved and Pale Fire by Nabokov. We kind of like thought about some of these issues, but we didn't have separate course papers on that content. Instead, the things that students were doing outside of the course were they each choose not a writer, but a book that they want to do research on. And so some of the examples might be, I'm just trying to throw someone did Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, or someone did Joy Harjo, the Native American poet. And what they did a kind of critical history of this person. So they assemble a bibliography. So we do a lot, we emphasize research skills. And so we do some sessions at the library where we have a librarian kind of show you how to I know you all know how to do research on the internet, but like how to maximize the kind of really good, your exposure to the really good curated sorts of content that are available, and to judge between those. And then you have to read, you have to kind of annotate, and what that means is sort of summarize 25 of those articles that you find, and then pull it all together into a critical history. So you might say like, wow, before 1950, when people talked about Heart of Darkness, they said this. And then in the early 60s, there was a big shift. And then there was this, crucial article that was published in 1980 that exploded the way people thought about this book. And so, or there was a kind of feminist angle that came in the 70s. So, yeah, it gives you a sense of a particular book that you've chosen, that you kind of understand that people have said different things about this book over the last at least 50 years. We ask you to do something that's at least 50 years old so that there's enough stuff you can find on it. So you can't do Twilight yet, but but
But that'll be
yeah,
fascinating when it comes of age, I think, you know.
yeah. Probably another 20 years,
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, yeah.
So we've talked about, junior seminar and the thesis process and kind of, the structure of the major. What does that all lead to? What do students do with that major after they graduate, Reed?
They do all kinds of things. It's really actually hard to generalize. I've known students who, some students go to graduate school. I'd say fewer do nowadays. I think more, I'm just thinking of some of the thesis students I've had in recent years. One has gone to law school. One has gone and worked in a nonprofit. One has gone into library science. One actually wants to be a mortician. That's I don't know where that came from, but one one of my students actually, she went overseas and worked at organic farms in Ireland and Britain, and then decided she actually wanted to study environmental science, and so she's actually getting a second bachelor's degree. No, she started the second bachelor's. Now she's actually doing a master's degree at University of Bristol, I think. So yeah, I think they do all kinds of things. No matter where some of them also have become secondary school teachers for sure. No matter where they land, I think, a common thread you can see is having good analytical skills, having good research skills, understanding the nuances of language, is something that I think English majors are going to have by the time they finish, just by sheer exposure to kind of thinking about how words are put together into sentences and paragraphs and thoughts, right? I actually think also with an English major, you get a sense of people's characters. I think you actually become a wiser, deeper person, frankly, uh, from studying and reading and talking about imaginative literature from the past and present. We understand more about what makes human beings tick, in whatever mode that might be. So, yeah, but English, our graduates have done all sorts of things. I had a graduate who became a psychiatric nurse. Um, they do all kinds of things. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
sure I'm forgetting something really obvious and important. Oh, lots of nonprofit work too, for sure. Oh,
But
and some of them have become novelists. I should have said that. Yeah, we actually have.
there's the obvious one.
Yeah, duh. No, we've had some graduates who've written novels. We've had some of which, including some students who didn't actually do a creative thesis, but went on and just wrote a novel anyway. Or students who've gone on, and actually quite a few students have gone on and won poetry prizes. Maybe not like when they were 23 or 25 years old, but a little further along. But once a pretty significant, we had someone who won the Dylan Thomas Award, for example. Pretty cool, pretty prestigious award. So yeah, they do good things. Journalists too, I should say. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm forgetting things, but
Well, I mean, I think your point about the skills that you gain from an English major really lends itself to this huge array of next steps because, you can really go anywhere with that.
yeah, absolutely. You can go anywhere.
So Viviana's got a question here. What is one of your favorite things about Reed's campus?
About the campus? Okay, right now I have to say the cherry trees, although we're now a week past peak. Um, actually, if you look at Lindsay's background, if you go a little to the other side, there's cherry trees there beautiful cherry trees that are blooming right now that I think actually, and they're in this area called Elliott Circle. So if any of you have visited campus, that's probably where your cab dropped you off. Um, and they were actually some kind of biology student thesis project 50 years ago or so. There's some there's actually been grafting on those trees. I don't totally understand the biology of it, but
I had no idea. That's cool.
yeah, and they're beautiful, and they always bloom about April 1st every year, and they're completely gorgeous. But so I love that. That's just this week. My office actually overlooks the canyon, which is this beautiful wetland. I always think of it as they call it a pond. I think it's more of a river. I don't know. But I sometimes out my window, I've seen blue heron and I've seen bald eagles, and there's beavers down there. I hear there's salmon coming back up there. It's this beautiful kind of, and it's a great place to, if you just need a respite from your work or from stress of any kind, it's great to just take a walk for 20 minutes in the canyon. It's really lovely. I've seen turtles there, not from my window. You have to go down to see the turtles. Yeah.
This winter, a couple of times I saw the beavers, and they
Oh
they
yeah.
swim in a pair with their noses together in this like V formation, and it's very
Mhm.
charming.
Yeah, you could tell the beavers from the nutria. The nutria don't swim as elegantly as the beavers do.
Yeah.
But I could
Well,
talk a
great.
lot about beavers.
So I'm going to ask us one more question, and then I think we'll wrap up. So if anybody has any last questions that they want to get answered, please pop them in there. So my question is, for you, Michael, why read? You've been here for a long time. I'm sure you have choices. You've probably taught at other places. So why do you stay here?
I did actually teach at other places. I've taught at, I was actually tenure track at the University of Vermont, and I left that job and came back to read because I missed having really great students. Honestly, uh, it's to me the most important thing that happens at Reed College is a relationship between faculty and students. That relationship happens in Hume 110. It happens, one-on-one in office hours. It happens in class, or some combination of all those things. But it's just a place where I can really form meaningful, thoughtful, intellectual, and not sometimes beyond intellectual, like bonds with other real people. And I would say that, I go into the when I would go into the classroom at University of Vermont or other places I've taught as well, it was me delivering content to the students. And when I go to the classroom at Reed, it's me getting a ball rolling and like learning from the students. And then, I mean, I have some stuff to say too.
Of course.
And for me, over the years, I've actually, from ways that students have challenged things I've said or that other students have said in class, from reactions that students have had to books, or the puzzlement that students have had sometimes about things I thought were obvious, or, and then I realized, oh, that's not so obvious. I've just learned so much about my own field. My knowledge of my field has deepened because the more I teach, the more I understand the sort of range of reactions that you can get from any particular literary text. And so for me, it's a constant process of learning from the students and from their reactions and from their comments and from their papers. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very special part of this campus, is that relationship that students and faculty have with each other and learning together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this for us. And thank you to all the students for having such great questions. Michael, is there any last wrap up you'd love to give?
Just we'd love to see you in the English department. I'll say that. I'm currently the chair. If you have any questions about the major, some nagging thought that didn't get addressed here, please feel free to email me. I think you have my name right in the screen there. I'm pretty easy to find at the Reed directory. So I'm happy to answer questions from prospective students. Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you to everyone who joined us today. Hopefully this was really informative and helpful and help you picture yourself here. And enjoy the rest of your Saturday. We are having a gorgeous sunny day in Portland, so I hope you're
Oh,
having
it's
a gorgeous
beautiful out. Yeah.
sunny day wherever you are as well.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everyone. Bye.
Take care. Thanks for coming.